Welcome to Slammed, a Celtics podcast covering the Celtics and the NBA at large. I'm Meghan Ottolini from WEEI, joined by Esteban Bustillos from GBH and Justin Turpin, also of WEEI. And guys, we are starting off our big topic of the week, talking about ugly games. Celtics have had a couple of ugly wins. And if you're a Boston fan, if you're a longtime Boston sports fan, I think you want to love the ugly wins. So they beat the Pacers 129-124 on Tuesday night. They beat the Pelicans 118-112. But are you coming off of these victories feeling more confident about the Celtics being able to find different ways to win as Joe Mazzulla has been trying to position it? Or are we calling this the closest thing that this team is going to get to a slump?
I mean, it's a good slump to have if you're winning. I guess the Pacers game was really weird, right? Because they score 81 in the first half, which was it tied their franchise record, if I'm correct.
Too shy.
Yes.
Right.
Oh.
Too shy
of
the franchise record for points scored in a half. And then they almost blow the game. I mean, a win is a win, and I do like the sort of mantra that Mazzulla has had, though, of like you can't expect things to go right all the time. I do, I guess with that game, I was sort of expecting it to be more of a strong win, of a blowout, but you know, I guess you take what you can get in the NBA on a night-to-night basis, really.
Yeah, and you mentioned Missoula's comments. Let's just jump right into that because we have what I thought was kind of a strong word that he threw out there apropos of nothing. So he just comes up with this word that I think he would love to back away from if he was being honest. Let's hear him talking about how the Celtics have been, I guess, their mindset in some of these games. So he was then pressed by the reporter in the follow-up question saying, is the entitlement, as he said, coming from inside the team, or is that an outside narrative? And Joe quickly jumped on that and goes, yeah, that's an outside narrative. That's coming from the outside, kind of like we can't believe the press about us. But I think he showed his hand a little bit there that he knows at times this iteration of the Celtics with the Jays has been accused of being a front-running team and has acted like a front-running team, and knows that they have a target on the back, and they can either use that to fuel themselves or they can go into these games with definitely lesser opponents when you're looking at the Pelicans, challenging but lesser opponents when you're looking at the Pacers and saying, well, these are scheduled wins, so we already have these circled. These aren't the Minnesotas or even the Golden States or the Clippers or anybody like that, people that we really, really need to, show up for. What did you guys make of those comments?
You're right. I mean, nobody pressed him to say entitlement. He did sort of say that himself. So I do wonder if that is part of something that they're trying to avoid, is that sense of, oh, we're the Celtics, we should win these games. I mean, Justin, you were at, I guess, the Pacers game. What was that sort of feeling that you got when the Pacers were trying to coming back there in the second half? Was there a sense, I guess, that the team was maybe starting to, panic isn't the right word, but that they were like, oh, this could slip out of their hands?
Honestly, my first thought was like, here we go again, because the third quarters have been an issue all season long, but this was more of a whole second half problem. But I think, like you said, like this is an issue that Joe actually wants them to deal with because he doesn't want them to get complacent. I think when you're this talented, it's easy to get complacent. Like, oh, you're supposed to win these games. Like you said, it's scheduled wins, but I think he's done a great job of kind of avoiding that. But my first thought was, here we go again, because it was the third quarter again. They start with the big run, and then it was 1 to 20 point lead, and then it's gone. So just those third quarters once again was my first thought.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we've been hitting on. Sorry, really quick, Esteban. I don't. What did you guys make of? And we don't need the sound, but him saying that he wants them to blow leads. Like, okay, go ahead, blow the lead so that I can see how you come back. Like, is there actually value to that in January?
Jalen came to the podium after on the next day and was like, I don't know about that one. He was kind of shot back against it, which was kind of funny.
Yeah. I guess like adversity can build, if your team, if you want to sort of go cliche, but I'm sure like they don't want to be playing close games, like right, like they don't want to have this historic first half and then have it be an actual game, and if you have 81 points, I think sort of the expectation in the back of your mind is like, oh, Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, Porzingis are probably not going to be playing towards the end of the fourth quarter, but they had to because it was a game. And mind you, Indiana is not what I would say is a scheduled win, a good team. And we've all been talking about Tyrese Halliburton this whole season, what he's done.
Okay,
Even,
but is it different when he's on a minutes restriction?
that's true, right, and you're right. Like he wasn't playing that whole game. Still, just the fact that they if I were a player, I would be like, yeah, look, adversity is good, but you want to win those games and just be done outright. I think this sort of gets to a larger issue with what Turp mentioned of like, hey, these third quarters, I don't think it's a narrative at this point. I think like it is a factor. They have been still, even with those third quarter issues, winning games. How will that factor when you get into the playoffs where those small margins, they become big margins once you get to the fourth quarter?
I think it's really interesting when you look at this point of the calendar. It's the toughest time for these championship contending teams on paper to stick to all their mantras and all their cliches and everything. Because if you've looked at the Celtics team last season, they went almost exactly the same record in January that they had this season. So last year's team in January went 10-5. This one's 11-5. And there were some real stinkers. I mean, we didn't really talk about the Clippers loss. That's a heinous loss for your franchise.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's interesting to look forward and say, okay, how do you keep what happened last year from happening this year? Because if you look back at the reporting that came out, I believe a lot of it was Jared Weiss from The Athletic talking about how things came apart with Grant Williams' minutes. And of course, he's not here anymore. And I think Jalen Brown wanting to focus the team much more so on defense when it was such an offensively powered team last year. A lot of that stuff tends to rear its head around the All-Star break. And while I know the NBA at large has its eyes on the trade deadline, I look at it and I think it's a great opportunity to talk about who Joe Mazzulla is showing himself to be in games, aside from the press conferences, which are a
Right.
totally different animal, but who he seems to be connecting with this team with Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday now added in, who he seems to be at this point this year compared to last year when they're very similar in terms of their records and where they seem to be on pace for getting back to the finals. I'll just toss it to you guys first. Wait, what do you think of Missoula this year compared to last year? It's a broad question.
Yeah. I think just having when we sort of been talking about this, having a full off season to get ready rather than like 4 days and you're now the head coach, has changed a lot. I think the chemistry is with a team, with people knowing how he operates has made this probably a better team. Not and obviously when you bring in Porzingis and Drew Holiday, that's going to change what you're able to do. So I would say it's better. I mean, the timeout stuff, I know that's been a criticism. It seems that he's gotten better, just like the end game strategy part. But the hardest part for being a head coach, something I've said before, is just getting people to what you're trying to sell. And I think this team has bought into what Missoula is trying to do. I don't know, Ted, what have you seen?
Yeah, I completely agree that they've bought into what he's selling, and that's impressive on his part because when you have a team that's this talented, it's easy for them to tune out the coach. Like we've seen it before, where these talented teams don't really want to. They think they're too good. They don't really want to listen to the coach, and I don't say maybe that's what happened with Milwaukee and Adrian Griffin, where that's not happening with the Celtics. And you look at that situation, you got to feel pretty good about Joe. And I just think like when you have a whole offseason to prepare, and then you get to build your own staff, and you bring in Charles Lee, you bring in Sam Cassell, that makes all the difference. And he's just been so much more comfortable from day one. And I think like when you go from a back of the bench assistant to head coach. There's a lot of different responsibilities that go with that. And you kind of talk to the media, and that's one thing, but like, you kind of lose touch with some of those bench players. And that's what he said. But like, he's really made it a point to be connected with the whole roster. And I think that's gone a long way. And they're really buying into what he said. So I give Joe an A for this year. I don't think there's really anything he could have done much better. He deserves a lot of credit for dealing with all these personalities. And granted, they're not like, like Brooklyn with Kyrie and KD. They're not like
Right.
that, but like with all this talent, the way he's handled it and gotten them to buy into his message is really impressive.
Yeah, look, the personnel is a double-edged sword because on the one hand, you have the most talented starting 5 in the league, and so it's like, okay, could this team be on autopilot? For the record, I don't think that they could, but you could people will make that argument. On the other side, you have guys now who are there's one ball, and you have to share it, and you have to at the same time, you have a supermax player in Jaylen Brown. You have Jason Tatum, who is usually in the MVP conversation and going to be getting his supermax deal too. So balancing out the personnel and being able to keep everybody focused on the same thing and the same ultimate goals and the same identity is a huge task in itself. But even when it comes to the basketball, I think that Missoula has some really different concepts than he was showing last year. He last year at this time he was talking about empowering the playmakers and having this free flowing offense that really didn't seem to have a lot of organization. I would encourage people who want to read up on this in a deeper level to read Jay King in The Athletic. He just had a nice piece talking about Joe Mazzulla's organization on the offensive side of the ball. And he's almost been kind of forced into that because he has 2 more playmakers injected into the system. And so it's like, okay, how are we going to take advantage of the different looks that defense is giving us in terms of the different strengths that we have now with who we have in the lineup? And then on top of that, I think it's very smart that he has tried to elevate and incorporate the defensive side of this team back in.
Yeah.
And he talked about it a little bit at times last year, but I think it was a real split in terms of who this team thought that they were coming off of the Ime Udoka season and then who they were becoming with their stats-driven, three-point, high-powered offense. And for them to incorporate a little bit of this zone defense that they've been showing now this season, going into as a wild card that they show, having Derek White elevated as such a great defender, obviously adding Drew Holiday when you're subtracting Marcus Smart. I think for all those reasons, aside from wacky stuff he might say at the podium or back and forth he
Yeah.
might get into with Gary Washburn or Dan Shaughnessy or anybody else, I really think he's showing himself to have a ton of growth this season. And to be honest, like if you had asked me back in November and October if I thought that he would be this different in terms of his coaching philosophies, I wouldn't have expected it.
Yeah, I know this is an end of the year sort of thing, and it's only January, but looking at across the league, do you think he's on a potential shortlist for coach of the year given how he's performed, how the Celtics have performed?
Justin, do you wanna take that one first? I just
Yeah,
talked for, like, 3 minutes.
I do think he's on that list. I think he was a candidate last year, so I think he's definitely on that list again this year. But I think it more looks back at Brad Stevens, right, as executive of the year. I think is more likely, especially with given what teams around the league have done, like the Thunder and even the Knicks, kind of turning it around now. So I think
Yeah.
he'll be on that list, but I think Brad Stevens will get more of the credit. But Joe deserves a ton of credit, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, yeah. I think thinking about like what Chris Finch has done with Minnesota. That's a guy who may be deserving of that. Same thing, similar situation, OKC. But yeah, I mean, I guess the Coach of the Year award is weird because it's not like you just give it based on record alone. Mike Brown won last year, and obviously the Kings weren't the best team in the league, but just that sort of turnaround. This is it's I guess with Missoula, it's like how can you not succeed with the roster you've been given? But I think about everything we just said of just the adjustments that he has made, this whole being able to play different people in different positions. The way he's used Drew Holiday is especially on defense, I think is really fascinating. So yeah, I could see that him being near that top of that list, if not ending up as the finalist.
Yeah, I think he should be in the conversation. I think, like a lot of other, whether it's players or anyone else involved in the organization, may be at a victim of how good their roster is. Same reason why I think Jason Tatum is has been. I haven't checked the Kia ladder. Is there a new one out today? But he's, for the last two, he's been sixth in the MVP voting. It I don't think that takes away at all or invalidates what I think has been a huge jump in his sophomore year of coaching. And I guess I just feel like after how much crap I've talked about him on the radio, like I just I need like a mea culpa or something. But who knows? Maybe February and March will be a hot mess and we'll get another maybe we'll have Derek White at the free throw line saying, I'm gonna make them both. And we'll have some
Yeah,
like that again where we'll all hang our heads.
yeah, and I mean, awards like that, those are great, but the real sort of coaching gauntlet is when you get into the postseason, and then when you have these 7-game series, when all of those tiny decisions, those tiny edges, when you use timeouts, etc., can win or lose games against the most talented teams in the league. So I think that's going to be sort of the real test to see how much has he learned from last year's playoff run, and how can he apply that to what this team is now.
Okay, well, unless you have anything else to add, Terp, let's move on to Take Flight. And in a beautiful timing here, I've just been logged out of my documents. So thank you for the security that Odyssey puts on all of our tech stuff. Of course, our first taste here for Take Flight is Marcus Smart returning to TD Garden for the first time now with the Memphis Grizzlies on Sunday. Where to begin? I guess the first thing that comes to mind for me is Jumbotron. Is there a video? Is he honored?
100%. 100%.
Is that the right move? Because there's a lot of people who feel like, "Oh my god, why do we do this for anyone who's, like, ever been in an Eastern Conference final with the, Celtics?"
I mean, I would say he's a little bit different, right? Because a lot different. He was legitimately the face of the organization for at least a little while, pre Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum. Um, somebody who it's always sort of surprising when you go and think and look. If you just look at his accomplishments on paper, right? He was never an all-star. He was never the team's leading scorer, but the Celtics fans, I mean, they lived and died by what he did. He's there's not many players who sort of fill the role that he does and play the way he does anymore in the league. So yeah, I think he deserves it. What do you think, Turp?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Isaiah Thomas got one, and Marcus Smart was, and I love Isaiah Thomas, one of my favorite Celtics of all time, but Marcus Smart was 10 times the Celtic that Isaiah Thomas was. The only thing I think about is, do they wait until he's actually playing? So do they hold off till next year? Because he'll be in the building, but he's not going to be playing. So do they hold off on the video? I don't think so, but that's the only way I can think of them not doing one. But there was people that were asking for his number to be retired. So there's no way this guy does not get a tribute video, and he deserves it. 5 Eastern Conference Finals trips, a trip to the NBA Finals. He's all over the Celtics history books. Like, this
Yeah.
guy totally deserves one, and he'll 100% get one. It's just
Don't
a matter of
forget
if they'll wait.
don't forget DPOY for, as a
Yes,
guard as well,
that's
you
right.
Yeah.
know? It's
That's
very
right.
what a
Uh,
time.
And
Turp,
his
I'm
community
glad.
work is a whole other thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the retirement thing, because I did want to bring this. I guess this is the hot take. This is the take of the take flight. Does number 36 deserve to be hung over TD Garden? As a realistic question, what if that was posed to y'all, what would your answer be?
No. No. And I trust me, I love Marcus Smart. I loved him when he was here. I think part of the reason that it can't be retired is because the direct return on the trade is proving so valuable. Like,
Yeah,
I
that's
actually
fair.
think that it really hurts two things. hurt the Marcus Smart legacy in real time. And I don't want to take away from what I thought was just such a great career for the Celtics and a fan favorite and one of my favorites and somebody I think is a great person. Like I could talk all day about Marcus Smart, but I think it's tough now when you see in his absence who Derek White has shown himself to be just absolute with an absolute consistency on both ends of the floor, and that Porzingis appears to be, somebody who I think is gonna be a key to their playoff run. Like, I think that that's what we were expecting, but what he's able to do for this team and what he's able to change when he's on the floor and the level that he's been able to play at while he's been here, I think it kind of because it's a one-to-one trade, like, the return is too strong. It's almost like it would be better if you could look at Marcus Smart as like, "Oh, the one who got away," but it certainly doesn't feel that way right now, does it?
Yeah, that's fair. Turbo,
And no championships. I mean, that's
yeah,
the biggest one.
yeah. I guess Turbo, then I'll pose it to you. If they had won in 2022, would that change a retirement conversation for Marcus Smart?
Honestly, if they had won in 2022, there's a chance he's still here. But unfortunately,
That's
that's
fair.
not the case, right? And I love Marcus Smart, but I just don't think he did enough to get his jersey retired. Like that's an exclusive group, and if you look in that
Yeah,
rafters, like the one thing those guys have in common are championships, and that's something Marcus Smart does not have. So I just can't see, like, unfortunately, I just don't think he did enough. And like you said, I think the direct return on the trade is a good point, but he just didn't do enough. I think it was what it comes down to. If he had won a championship in 2022, like I said, he'd probably still be here, and the conversation would be a little bit different. But without a championship, it's really hard to get your number up there.
yeah. I looked
Who
it up.
Oh, sorry,
No,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say I did look it up. There's only two Celtics whose numbers are retired who never won. That was Ed McCauley, who played with the team from 1915 and 1956, and Reggie Lewis, R.I.P. the legend, truly.
Aw. So wait, who do you think would get their number more likely to get their number retired? Marcus Smart or Ray Allen?
Oh,
'Cause Ray Allen
uh,
has the championship, but he
he
doesn't
does have the
really have
championship.
he doesn't have the accolades in the playoff run,
Yeah. Uh,
and his departure was so ugly.
his departure was weird. I mean, Ray Allen is a Hall of Famer, but Smart, I would lean towards Smart only because of just like his just sort of what he meant to the franchise as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Ray Allen thing is weird. Like, are him and KG talking yet again? Has that happened? Do we
Yeah.
do we know? So
So
they are.
KG was asking for his number to be retired. It was
Oh,
like
yeah,
he
Ray's
was
so I
right.
next, damn it.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah. Um,
Ray Allen talked for, like first of all, Ray will talk for, like, 30 minutes at a time. Um, but he talked after the KG retirement ceremony, and it sounds like a lot of that is water under the bridge, at least publicly, like publicly facing they're good again. So I think that wouldn't be a roadblock at this point.
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I would still lean towards Smart. I mean, I know like, two finals appearances. Um, but still, that's a tough question. I don't think it's an either or situation. But at the same time, I don't. If we're being realistic, I don't think Smart would. His number would go up in the rafters, given everything that we just said.
I also don't
All
think
right.
5
Oh,
seasons from Ray is enough. Only
yeah.
5 seasons here in Boston. I just don't think that's enough.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, moving on to our next take in our take flight. The New York Knicks. Is there a dark horse in New York? So the Knicks right now are on an insane tear. If you haven't been paying attention, I don't really blame you. Ever since the OG trade, they're an 8-game win streak. They might have one of the, I mean, I know they have one of the best defenses in the league. It might be the top defense. It's the top defense right now. We just talked about the Celtics finishing 11-5 in January. Knicks are 14-2. Do we need to take this New York team seriously? And do you see them as a real Eastern Conference Finals contender or somebody who simply may just upset one of the stronger teams early in the tournament?
I would say they're a contender, truly. I was sort of caught off guard too when looking through the standings, getting ready for the show last night. But yeah, 14-2 in January. They have wins in the past month against the Nuggets, the Wolves, Sixers, big, some of the top teams in the league right now. It's the most victories in a single month since the 1993-1994 season for the Knicks. Look, I think given everything that like the Bucks are going through. They just lost last night to the Blazers, and one game isn't necessarily indicative of a whole season, but the Blazers are not a good team at this moment. And I know it was like probably an emotional return for Damian Lillard, etc. But I could see them leapfrogging Milwaukee given the coaching issues, that change. Uh, Look, the OG trade I think has worked phenomenally. I think they're a legit team that can, I don't know if win the conference, but I could see a Celtics Knicks Eastern Conference Finals.
I just wanted to run through a few of these stats because the New York Post had this really good little collection if you want to hear about this defense. So during their run in January, these are some of their rankings. Their defensive rating is 104.4. So they have a better defensive rating than the Cavs, the T Wolves, Grizzlies, Celtics, and Nets. They have the lowest amount of points allowed. They have the lowest percentage of field goals allowed, and they have the second to lowest 3-pointers allowed, only behind the Celtics. So they've figured something out, injecting OG into that, and he's missed the last 2 games, I believe. But I think that there's something real there with what they're building in New York.
Yeah, that OG trade looks like a slam dunk right now. At least the early returns, they're 12-2 with OG. Like that's impressive. And you look at it like they're only a game behind the Bucks for the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, and the Bucks are kind of free falling a little bit. So I could definitely see this team being a 2 seed, and like they knew what they were getting with OG. Like OG is one of the best defenders in the league. They knew he was going to boost their defense, but how much they were going to boost it is pretty incredible right now. And Tibbs is known for his defense, so they've done a great job, and that team is one to look out for.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Julius, first OG has been hurt, so how that situation plays out, and Julius Randle's injury as well. Those going to be big, I guess. Uh, does it feel weird that the Knicks have been sort of overlooked given they are in New York? Again, they caught me by surprise. I think they caught a lot of people by surprise. Is it because of the history that they have that people may have been sleeping on them?
I don't really know. I think it's more it goes in line with the expectations at the preseason. Going into the season, these were not the expectations of who this team was going to be. And obviously you have a blockbuster trade partway through the season, but I feel like that trade got lumped in with, the Pacers trade and the recent Miami trade, where it's these teams who are more on the margins of Eastern Conference contention. And the Knicks feel like they're separating themselves from that group now. Like, I would say certainly.
Yeah.
I think it's just still kinda early in the season, and what they've been doing is really been since that trade. So we're only a month into it. I think it's getting the proper due now, where everyone's sitting up and being like, "Oh my god, like, is this real? Is this sustainable? Do we need to look out for this team?" I should have looked this up before, but does anybody know next time Celtics see the Knicks?
It's next month. It's the 24th, I believe. It's a
Okay.
Saturday night.
In March?
Sorry, this month. I didn't really
Yeah,
even
we're in
realize that they changed
Happy
February,
it up.
my
February.
guy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Happy
happy
February.
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 Yeah.
We
So I
survived
think it's
January.
24th
The longest
in
January on record.
MSG.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was.
So that's suddenly I mean, those are always big games, but that game means a whole lot a whole lot more now for I think both teams. I guess stemming off of this, I know we're getting the full all-star roster later tonight, recording here on Thursday. Uh this has been sort of a point of contention that I've seen among Knicks Twitter. Did Jalen Brunson deserve to have Damian Lillard's spot as an all-star starter?
Without the stats in front of me, I'd say yeah. I think Damian Lillard is stealing a couple guys' spots there. If it's Jalen Brunson, if it's Donovan Mitchell, there's just a few other younger players that I think I wouldn't say, like, don't have the name recognition because there's certainly stars in the league, but I think just haven't had the moments, in postseasons so far that Damian Lillard has had with Dame time and everything else. So part of that is the game of how all-star voting works for the first ballot, and so, like, for the first team, I should say. So that part of it is just the fan influence, but yeah, I mean, I think if you've been following what's been happening with the Bucks and who Dame has been this season, I think that he's one of a handful of guys who would be more worthy of that spot.
Yeah, I had originally put Dame as the starter, and then seeing how it's played out, I was like, oh, maybe it's possible. I was wrong. I will say this is something I didn't realize. This is his first time being an All-Star starter, and that makes sense when you consider that he's been playing in the same conference as Steph Curry for most of his
Right.
career. I mean, Terp, did you think that should have been a switch?
That
Oh yeah,
surprises me though.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. I was surprised too that he had never started an All-Star game, even like with playing with Curry, because there was a couple times Curry was hurt for a little while there, and Dame surprising wasn't a starter. But yeah, I thought 100% that Brunson should have been a starter over Dame. I just think, like Megan said, like they both have the name recognition, but like everyone's been talking about the Bucks, right? The Bucks, the Sixers, and the Celtics, I feel like are the teams in the Eastern Conference that everyone's really watching. No one's really paying attention to the Knicks, and then the Knicks are sneaking up. And granted, they really just got hot this month. Like they were kind of hovering right in the middle of the conference around like 5,
right.
6. So now they're starting to, figure it out. But he 100% got snubbed. Brunson should have been a starter over Dame 100%.
Right, right. And again, like folks have been talking about the issues defensively that the Bucks have had after the Drew Holiday trade. Brunson probably a bit of a better defender on that side of the ball than Dame is, given his sort of size and height. So
It's a low bar.
yeah, fair. Yeah. But you know what? Shout out Dame. It's crazy that he had never been
Yeah, look,
an
don't
all-star
get me
starter.
wrong. Like, I love Dame. I'm
Yeah,
surprised he's never been a starter. I just think if you're basing it on this season and that's what the award is based on, it doesn't totally make sense to me, but there's the fan part of it. Um, our final take for Take Flight. This is a big picture take. And Esteban, I'd love for you to walk us through this because we've had these moments recently of great individual scoring
yeah.
performances. And obviously, even if you just look at that Pacers game, the Celtics have 81 points in the first half. I think it's something that anybody who's watching the NBA right now, the league is going, these offenses are getting kind of crazy. And where is it coming from? And is this the direction that we want basketball to keep going in? So much offense, especially when you have a team like the Knicks, who we were just talking about turning into a great defensive team there.
Right. Right. Yeah. So I think this stemmed from you looking at the performances that Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, Karl Anthony Towns recently all had 60, 70-point games plus. Looking up, Dan Devine of Yahoo wrote, there's only been 19 seasons that featured 10 or more 50-point scoring performances. The last 9 from the 2015-16 season to now, that's nearly half of that list, and only 10 campaigns have featured 14 or more, and the last 5 from 2018-19 to now comprise half of that list. So people are scoring these huge 50-point games much more frequently than before, and obviously the league has gotten more welcoming, more open to scoring. The rule changes have made it harder for people to guard the way they used to, especially on the perimeter. Players are just probably specifically big men are a little more skilled in terms of outside shooting. So I think it makes sense that we're seeing more scoring. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing per se. I mean, we nope. As much as the league has welcomed and embraced scoring, nobody's matched the 81. Not to even mention the 100 that happened under much different, more physical, quote unquote, times that the NBA used to have. So I don't necessarily see it as a problem unless people think that it's going to water down these accomplishments.
So I don't know about watering down the accomplishments. It's certainly more in the direction, I think, of how the league wants the game to look. Like, you want a high scoring game, and you want to be able to point to individual stars in that way. The only thing is, nobody wants it to turn into the all-star game, right? Like, nobody wants the elimination of defense. And you hear mostly old heads, but I
Yeah.
would throw myself in here at times too. You want it to be a physical game. You don't want it to just be the finesse game. And you don't want it to just be outside shooting and, on the perimeter all the time. The worst, is when it's a fast break and it just goes into a corner three every single fast break. I think the important thing is you want it to be have variation in the game. And so I'm not sure that there is something that the league can roll back in terms of what they've done to elevate the offense and kind of tamper down the physicality of it. But I I I think we all get excited when we're watching a very physical game. And
Yeah.
I guess it's my way of saying there's not a solution to it, but I wouldn't say it's absolutely like a great thing for the league for there to be such inflated points out there.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of a balance because you don't necessarily want, as you mentioned, sort of an inflation of scoring. On the other end, you don't want like the '80s, '90s brand of basketball where people were just elbowing each other in the face on defense, and that was fine. And you'd have like,
But like sometimes I do.
yeah, sometimes,
Like,
but
you know what I'm saying? Like, just
yeah,
sometimes.
right,
You
right. I
know,
mean,
I don't need bad boy Pistons, but it's like, can we have a little bit of physicality?
yeah, I mean, so what do you see this as an issue for basketball as a whole, or is this sort of being conflated out of proportion?
Honestly, I feel like this is kind of what they want. This is kind of what the league wants is they
Mhm.
want more points. So in a way, it's kind of what they're looking for. But I don't love it as a basketball fan. Like, and I know you guys seem to be on the same page. It's like I like the physicality. Like I like the defense. Like all this points isn't necessarily fun. Like I want to see some defense as well. But I think that's the direction the NBA is going in. Is they want to see more points. They think points are what brings people in. They want to see the 3-point shot. They want to see all these dunks and stuff. No one really cares about the physicality anymore, unfortunately. But I think that's what the league wants. And personally, I'm not a fan, but I mean, it's still basketball, so I'm still going to watch.
I've seen a couple of different proposals to address this, some of which I'm not necessarily sure how they would work, or if I agree with them. One, moving back the 3-point line, along those lines, getting rid of the corner three spots,
Mhm.
which uh, do y'all agree with any of those at all, or think that there's dimension wise of the court anyway that you would address the scoring to try to sort of, I guess, dampen that down a bit.
The corner 3 fit conversation has definitely gotten some traction over the last couple years. I don't know that that's the answer. That all feels just as analytics based as the way that the league has turned in terms of three-point shooting. I think some of it has to do with a lot of the rule changes favoring offensive players. And, I every year it feels like there's something that is tougher to call on defense. And so I don't know. I like Terp said, like, I think that this is how the league wants it. So I wouldn't see one of those big changes coming.
I hate the corner 3 one too. I just think like the corner 3 is such a valued shot in the game. And if you look at it, they're really not generated that much. Like there's some games that like teams will really get out to the corner, but it's such an important shot in the game. Like, and they're really not generated that much, like I said. So I think that would be a horrible mistake because I think teams oftentimes will play to try to get to the corner 3 because that's the most efficient shot. So I would hate if they got rid of that. And it's also my favorite spot to shoot. So
Yeah, yeah, it's the best spot to shoot. One idea I have sort of thought about in the past, and this is sort of, it was sort of like to bring big men, at least playing down in the post, a little bit back more into the picture. But something that could also be done to maybe balance out is, the lane was expanded to keep big men from just posting up there and scoring gaudy numbers down. I wonder if you shrunk it back to sort of not necessarily its original uh width, but a smaller lane, so that way big men could stay near the rim more, if that would at least sort of balance out some of the scoring, because then that way it would be harder for ball handlers to get to the lane to drive when you have someone like Embiid, etc., who could just hang out there by the rim without getting that defensive 3 seconds. Would y'all think that would be something that the league could look at?
Yeah, I think that would come down to, again, though, that's like a taste thing. Like, what kind of offense do you want? And even if it's okay, you can have a big man who can score down on the post, who has good post action. That's still going to be analytically less valuable than the corner three. So it's like it'll be some variation in different points of attack, but I don't. And again, it's all to me. It's like it's still offensively based thinking, and I just don't really have a solution for what they're doing other than, we roll it all the way back and we bring hand checking back into the game or like something absolutely crazy.
And you see offenses going 5 out anyway. So it's not really gonna matter if they're all out by the perimeter anyway, you know? So
That's true.
it's such an interesting conversation though. I didn't even think about the dimensions thing, to be honest. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. One of like my favorite sort of like what if scenarios is like, what if you could, like, sort of in baseball, how you could design those field dimensions
Yeah.
by ballpark. Like, what would that look like if you could, like, if the Celtics could design their own court dimensions, like where would they put the three, or what, like, I don't. I like it if you had like Dame Lillard, would you just stretch the three out another like 5 feet so only he could shoot it? Stuff like that. But anyways, yeah, I understand where people are sort of coming from. I don't necessarily think, though, all of these accomplishments, all of these big games are diluting the achievements of scorers per se.
No.
I think it's. I mean, we're still amazed over it. I don't. I also don't necessarily know if anybody's ever going to get to 100 again, just given how the game is played. Like when Wilt did it, it was much different. He was just, he could just bulldoze through defenses. So I like it. I like where offenses are headed, but I do also agree. Like it would be nice to get better defense, and that being a little bit more welcomed in the league as a whole.
All right, well, let's end it there. We're recording on a Thursday, so Celtics are seeing the Lakers tonight, but honestly, with what it looks like the Lakers are rolling out in terms of their lineup, I don't think that's going to be the most consequential game. Who knows? Maybe it will be a barn burner, and I'm totally wrong. But like I said, we have Marcus Smart's return this weekend, and rolling into February, we will catch you guys next week. Thanks for hanging out with us.